Well, hi there. It's the Church Solutions Podcast. My name is Phil Thompson.
And I'm Steve Lacey.
Steve Lacey, did you watch the game last night?
I did. That's why I couldn't get to sleep. So, yeah.
Yeah, we're
Nobody knows what we're talking about, but I follow University of Arizona, and they are ranked number one, and they had a nail biter last night.
University of Arizona up by a big lead at halftime, almost choked it out at the end, but we prevailed. So anyhow, it happens. That's just the way it goes. So anyhow, yeah, U of A is currently ranked number one as of this podcast, and they've got a good team this year. So looking forward to seeing how far they go. Right?
Yeah. See if they get past the first round.
Yeah, that would be good, wouldn't it? Not sure how good Cincinnati is. We'll find out about that maybe. I don't know if our guest knows that or not. But speaking of our guest, let me read his bio. He's a good friend of ours, and I put my glasses on so I could see. So today's guest is the founder and leader of Sound Concepts. That's a company with a primary mission to provide high-quality communication, audio and video systems for houses of worship, some schools, as well as corporate environments. He's been serving churches since 1988 and helping them create some excellent experiences for their members in their facility as well as online. So without further ado, let's welcome Jim Murphy to the Church Solutions Podcast. Jim, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much.
All right, it's good to have you. This is episode number 505, by the way. I forgot to mention that, episode number 505. So, Jim, you're located in the beautiful town of Mason, Ohio, which is, I'm from Ohio originally, Youngstown. So Mason would be northeast of Cincinnati, right?
That's about right. Yep.
Yeah, good deal. All right, good. So you follow their basketball team, Cincinnati?
Not much. Not a big sports guy.
All right, good. Well, that's fine. We won't hold that against you. All right. So Jim, it's good to have you on the podcast today, and Steve and I will take turns asking you some questions. So I'm just going to kick things off. And was I right about that? Have you been serving churches since 1988?
In this format, yeah. I started as a teenager doing sound. Of course, that was long before video, and then just kind of progressed. I was tech director today's term at a number of churches, or at a church major before I started this company. So I've been doing it a little bit longer than that.
Yeah. Okay. So you've been. This is not your first rodeo, obviously. So I'll just kick things off with a question. So, what's one of the? I guess you might call it the timeless sound problem that churches seem to be struggling with from back in your beginning days to maybe what they're still dealing with today.
As far as the live part of it, reverberation and getting good intelligibility at each seat in the space. Of course, the larger the room, generally speaking, the worse the problem is.
Yeah. So when you say intelligibility, easy for you to say, that means everybody hearing kind of the same thing and able to make out. I don't know what that word means.
Okay. Well, sibilant sounds are difficult to reproduce in a space. So obviously S's, T's, and D's and that sort of thing. So if your room isn't conducive to that, it's difficult to tell the difference between a back, or a bat. And so if you don't know the context of what's being said, you could come up with a totally different meaning for a sentence. So what we try to do, obviously, is to create sound reproduction in the space the best that we can to make that as clear as we can at every seat. So the larger the space, the more time delay there is in reverberation, the worse that problem gets. So you get into cathedrals, for instance, so they've got a 40-foot high ceiling and they're 100 feet long and 35 feet wide. It's an echo chamber before you ever say anything. So there's a real challenge to that. And there's technology that is overcoming a lot of those issues. It's very helpful.
So will you get into um, changing the physical space before you start looking at equipment and that sort of thing? Do you say, hey, in order to make any really good progress here, we're gonna have to lay some carpet, or we're gonna have to, do you do that as well, or?
We do advise in that, and there are cases where we'll do acoustic studies and make a recommendation for acoustic paneling. Generally, most churches have carpet or padded pews, which are very similar because it covers a large amount of that space. Um, and that is something we do. We use a software called Ease, which is a software for modeling sanctuary, well, any space, but it models the interior of a room, and then it gives us those reverberation times, and then we can adjust that, and we can do that at every frequency in the spectrum. And then we can model in acoustic damping material and see what frequencies are being taken care of with more material. So each room has what's called a fundamental frequency. That is a sound frequency that's louder than all the rest. And then there are harmonics of that, which generally speaking would be on an octave. So if you had a 500 cycle reverberation or fundamental frequency reverberation, then 1,000 cycles would be high too. So would 2,000, so on. And so you're trying to find those metrics and address those. So back to your original question, we don't do a ton of acoustic damping because of the cost. It's just very, very expensive. There was a church that we designed, did not get the order, but they spent $50,000 handily putting in some acoustic damping to clean things up. We did advise that. We did the original sound system in that building when it was built, and we advised them to do it. It took them 10 years, but they did finally put some in to try to take care of the problem. But anyway, so yes, before you can really design a system, you have to understand the acoustics of the space. So yes, we do that.
So you mentioned that you can model some acoustics. Did I hear that right? Where you could go in and say, oh, if you had the dampening, this would be the effect of it, or
Yes,
did I
that's
not hear
correct.
that right? Oh,
Yeah,
really?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we can take a look at it. In the industry. We generally look at 1,000 cycles. That's kind of considered the middle frequency in the spoken word range. And so we will, in a simple setup, we will simply measure the room based on 1,000 cycles. If it's a complex, so it's music hall, which is not in our purvey, but if it's music hall, they probably model and take a look at response at all frequencies from 20 to 20,000. So
So,
yes, yeah. Let me answer the first part of that. Yes. So this modeling software, this Ease software, allows us to build a wireframe of the interior of the space. So if it's a dome, then we can build a dome in this model, and then that will in turn allow us to take a look at what frequency is at every seat in the place. So we put seats in there. You can either put individual seats, or we can just put an audience area, whatever. Most of the churches that we deal with don't have the money to do an elaborate assessment of the space, so we just do an audience area in general. Then we can park a loudspeaker at whatever location we want to in the room and see exactly what's going to happen to each frequency after the loudspeaker is included.
okay, wow. So
Sounds
do you go into a church and say, does the type of worship music make a difference on how you tune the space?
Not so much in how you tune it, but it does make a difference in how much you want to dampen it. So a contemporary space, uh, you've got faster rhythms, so you have to reduce your reverberation, or each beat's going to fall on top of the next one or the last one, and that's going to make music sound bad at a point. So if it's a traditional church, a Catholic church or church with a choir and an organ in the loft, then we want that reverberation time to be longer because it needs more time to develop out into the space to give you the integrity of the sound. So if you have a pipe organ that's used on a regular basis, you don't want to put a bunch of damping in that space because generally speaking, the pipe organ's tuned to the room. So back to this church I was talking about that took them 10 years to get around to it. You have a pipe organ in there, and they put all this damping material in there and have not retuned the pipe organ. Now, I haven't heard the room work, but I can tell you without hearing the room work, it does not sound as energetic as it did before because they've sucked up a bunch of frequencies. And the ones that they've sucked up, they haven't replaced with more volume out of the organ. So I can almost guarantee you that the organ sounds flat and dead.
This is
Spoken word probably sounds a lot better, but
this
it'll screw around with the organ sound.
this is quite a science. So when you say dampening stuff, like in my office here behind me, I don't know if you can see this.
Yeah,
I've got
like,
something to dampen. Is that dampening? Is that
yeah,
what you would?
yeah,
And then I've also got this,
right.
and which is a deal here that I don't. I won't get into it. But let me give you a practical problem that a lot of churches have, and maybe you got a church that their worship center, their sanctuary seats maybe 300 people, and they're playing contemporary Christian music. So in other words, they've got a band. You know, we're not talking a choir, we're talking guitars, and they got a drummer who is really enthusiastic. And because I'm giving you problems that I've had to deal with, because I used to deal with worship teams a lot when I was in ministry. And the drums are just too loud. They're loud for people on the stage that are trying to sing and hear each other. What do you suggest? Because what we've done is, put dampening stuff around the drums. People have put pillows inside the bass drum, sheets of not glass, but what is it? Plexiglass,
Yeah,
right?
put them in a cage.
Yeah, we put them in a cage. I mean, are those all? I mean, is that something? I've given you a lot of options here, Jim. But what? How do you deal with something like that?
Well, yeah, all of the options you mentioned are valid. And the last church I was at, where I was responsible for all of that, I did build a cage. We really needed to put air conditioning in there, not for cooling, but for conditioning. Yeah, we that is the answer. If you can't find a drummer who knows how to keep energy at a low volume, there are drummers who are perfectly capable of that. But if you get a drummer who's used to playing in a large venue, it's very difficult to tone them down. So yes, there's a number of things you can do. You can do something as simple as build a 2x4 frame wall around it and fill it with Owens Corning, which will damp a lot of it down. Doesn't take the cymbals out. You really can't take the cymbals out of the room if you don't put a cage around it. And there are some pretty sophisticated looking cages being produced commercially these days that are pretty nice looking,
So
including air movement and everything too. So
air movement. So why is air movement important?
because it smells pretty bad in there after a bit. So
Okay, so you build a
They got
cage. I don't mean to prolong this thing, but you
no, that's
build a
right.
cage, and so you do you mic. So then you mic the drums,
Correct. Then you
right?
got to mic the
Okay,
drums because you're taking
yeah,
all of that energy out of the room. Got to put
right.
it back in.
Yeah.
So you add that back by strategic miking. So number of different things that you can do there. Generally, you're going to have an overhead mic or two that kind of just give you the accumulated or mixed sound. But
Right.
then you're gonna mic individual instruments separately. And there are manufacturers who make kits specifically for that. Audix is one that we generally prefer to use. That's at a modest price point and have very good response. And they've got kits with like 7 mics in them or something of that nature that will cover all the varying instruments.
I get the sense that you come into a space, you're able to take a bunch of measurements, you're able to model it if you need to model it. You kind of sound like a doctor that's, what are your what are the symptoms going on, and so that I can make the adjustments, as opposed to where I think of a sound guy, and I was a sound guy until they fired me after my second week. So where I because I didn't have the discerning ear. How much of this requires? How much of it is art, and how much is it science?
It's more science than art if you're talking about speaker placement and room acoustics. Um, Mixing is an art. So, but in terms of designing a space or designing reinforcement in a space and then how that space is going to be treated, that's a science. It's formulas. So if you were to break into the coding of ease, the ease software, it's complex mathematical formulas is what it is. That's pretty much all it is. Um, and I guess really getting into the weeds a bit, each speaker manufacturer that wants to be considered in modeling, in this case, literally takes a loudspeaker of theirs and takes a microphone and goes all the way around that loudspeaker and all the way up and down and gets the characteristics of the dispersion of sound out of that loudspeaker, and that gets interpreted again into formulas, which ease then picks up and places and projects out into the space. So that's where we're getting our metrics at the end that says 500 cycles is too loud at this seat, not loud enough at this seat. It all has to do with the ability of the individual loudspeaker to project. So there's two different things that you're dealing with here, and it's all heavy science. It's all mathematics. If you asked me to do this by hand, I couldn't possibly do it. And it has to be done with software to do it. But it's a mistake for a church to tell the sound guy to put loudspeakers in it because he's going to look at it altogether different. An example I often give is if you're putting a furnace in your room, you don't really care where the registers are, because once the heat comes out into the space, everybody's going to feel warm, and where that came from doesn't matter. But that's not true with loudspeakers. You can't put them any place you want to put them and have what you hear sound good everywhere it needs to. So it's an altogether different thing. It's not a study of volume of sound in a space. It's a study of clarity of sound at a seat. It's a very
So
different approach.
as you visit churches, how often do you go in and say, "Wow, this is completely overbuilt or over, you know, they went way too big on their sound system for the environment," or vice versa, where they're going where it's not working? Is that most churches are not
Yep,
dialed in right, or
95%
oh
handle it.
really?
Yeah,
95% are not dialed in correctly.
right. Yep. Yeah.
Wow.
And
Which way do
I
they
mean,
go? Do they go too big for what they have, or they
no,
go
by
too?
and large, not. Churches are so budget conscious that, generally speaking, what they do is they tell the sound guy, who's generally speaking a volunteer. That's not true today as much as it was 10 years ago. With the mega churches, they are hiring professional people. Church I go to has 30, 40,000 people on a weekend, so they've got a whole staff of people who are knowledgeable. No question about it. But back to our 300 seat person, well, our church, they're not going to be paying $75,000 a year for a sound guy. So they're going to tell the guy that they're paying $200 a week to show up on the weekend to put a sound system in there, and he's not going to understand it. Most of the guys come at it from a bar band standpoint, from a design standpoint, rather than for a spoken word venue. So if I build a high quality spoken word system in a venue, it's going to reproduce music very well because it takes more intensity to do spoken word correctly than it does music.
Oh, okay.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's interesting. So
That's very
if you go
interesting.
the bar band approach, and then the pastor gets up there and everybody's going, "I can't make out what he's saying. That
Right.
sounds like a back instead of a a
Yeah.
bad."
A lot of that, yeah. I mean, we did a. I always get a kick out of this story. We did a Catholic cathedral up the road here, and the pastor said to me, or I guess I said to the pastor when we were done, I said, "You realize that nobody past the front pew was able to understand anything you've said up until now." And his response was, "Well, I guess that's why I've been here 20 years." But we turned it around by using some very sophisticated technology from a company called Rinkus Hines, where we put speakers in where we could steer the sound with a computer. So we literally was able to create this. We had about a 70-foot or 80-foot seating area to cover, and we divided that into 8 projected sound groups, and we were able to adjust the volume level of the first sound group, which was aimed at the front pew, versus the 8th, which was aimed at the back, to where you could walk into that space and it sounded exactly the same from front to back, and clear as a bell at the back row. So, and you still had all the echo of the cathedral. This is again one of these cathedrals that's a big space, but it sounded good. But the technology is there, but that's there on the speaker side. So we have the technology on the design side, but we have to have commensurate speaker technology to be able to effect or effectively manipulate what we learn about the room. So just grabbing a speaker and throwing it in there is not the answer.
Right. So let me jump in here because you can tell Steve Lacey's a mechanical engineer. All these questions, but let me change the gears a little bit here to again the practical side. Is if I'm a pastor listening to this and I've got a church of 150 people, whatever it is, and I got $1,000 to that I've got designated now for my sound system. I got $1,000. I know this is because you don't have a context here, but what would you recommend I do with $1,000 if I'm the pastor for my church sound system?
I would find a systems integrator like myself that understands acoustic design. So some systems integrators are great at matching impedance to an amplifier. Other systems integration people understand more what I'm talking about here, which is a different level. So you find somebody like that, they don't even need to be on location. They just need dimensions of the church and some other things, and have them do a speaker placement study, which is not terribly expensive. I mean, I don't know what other people charge, but in the most simple context, without doing an acoustic study on a space, if we simply want to look at where is the best place to locate a loudspeaker and what loudspeaker is optimal for that space, you can do something like that for $250 to $500, I would think, almost any market, something like that. Now, if the integrator's got to come out and measure your space and do some other testing, you can't get it done for that kind of number. But if it's just if you can send if the pastor can send the drawing to an integrator like myself or somebody else, that we can get all of the metrics for that space and plug it into the ease software, that can be done in a couple hours for an average church like what you're talking about. They really should do that. They really should make that commitment, and then find somebody locally that can do the installation.
So there's going to be, in that example, there's going to be trade-offs between, you come back and you say, what we need to do is lower these speakers and put them over here. And the reason they put them where they did was so they could hide them, right? So that they weren't ugly for, everybody. How important is that? Can you really make a big difference just moving things around?
Oh, nightmare night and day difference. There's a nightmare if you don't. We just finished a small sanctuary. I don't know how big it was in actuality, but let's say 200 seats. And somebody who had no clue put 4 speakers in there. They put 2 speakers, one in each corner of the front and one in each corner of the back. And this is a little Catholic church with a dome or with an arched ceiling. And you couldn't understand anything. I mean, the sound was coming at you from the center of the chancel two sides and from behind you. So especially if you were seated anywhere from the middle back, it was unintelligible. So we took all four of those loudspeakers out. We put two loudspeakers much closer to the center. We got steerable speakers that don't fire up, only fire down. Okay, so there's no sound going up into that ceiling at all, other than what's reverberated up there. No original sound. And absolutely turned the sound around in there. Now, that's all placement and the right loudspeaker. So it's very critical if you want to do it right. So we took all four of those speakers out that they put in there. So,
Wow.
so
Right.
yeah, location is everything. And if you've done some engineering, you understand what the inverse square law is. And if you, the, a lot of churches will put speakers on a stick, and that loudspeaker is close to the front row and far from the back row. Inverse square law says it isn't going to be as loud at the back row as it is at the front row. So the answer is, let's turn it up. Well, now we're going to blow people out in the front row, be able to hear people in the back row. But if I take that same loudspeaker and I stick it 15, 20 feet in the air, and I've got the right horn in it to where it's projecting the way it needs to be, I can smooth that sound right out and make it essentially the same volume from front to back. So position is critical. And again, I keep coming back to this, the right loudspeaker. You just can't go out to the guitar store and buy a speaker on a stick and shove it in a place. You'll get music, no question about it. But if you want intelligibility along with it, that doesn't work.
We're running out of time. I got to ask another question because I used to do a lot of stuff on stage. So I'm on the stage, stage volume, and it's kind of what we used to call the stage volume war. How do you deal with the stage volume? Should people wear inner ears now? Again, this is people playing guitars and drums and all that stuff.
Yeah, so in-ears are really the solution if you've got the funding, but even bigger than that, an engineer that knows how to mix it. And I've always been resistant to in-ear stuff with volunteers because you can hurt somebody's ears in a hurry. And they can't get away from it because they can't put their fingers in their ears. So they can rip that thing out, which you see musicians do that all the time. They can rip it out, but if it's that loud in their ear, it's probably pretty loud in the room as well. So that always scares me. But if you've got a technician that knows how to mix for in-ears, that's your solution. The other solution is to get, if you're using acoustic monitoring, get the speakers as close to the individual as you possibly can. It's counterintuitive logic because you think, well, the closer I get that loudspeaker to the microphone, the more it's going to get picked up in the mic. No, that's not the case. I can stick the monitor in the back of the room, and for it to be loud enough for the musician to hear, I got to turn it up loud enough for the musician to hear. So the same amount of volume is going to go into the microphone. But I can stick a little hotspot 18 inches or 24 inches from the musician's head. It's the same volume going into the microphone, exactly the same, but it cuts down on what's going out elsewhere on the stage and elsewhere in the room. But I'm a big proponent of hotspots. Small speakers on a stand, get them as close to the musician as you can. Guitar player, put his amplifier on a tilt, face it at him, get it as close to his face or to his side as you can, so he's not going to play as loud. If you got a B3, shove it in the back room and put some microphones on the Leslie.
I got one more question here.
Sure.
So the doctor comes in and he diagnoses my space and he gets it all figured out. And then he goes away and my volunteers come in to go run everything every week. What are my chances of success?
Probably not very good because they're going to change it because they don't understand it. And
Okay.
it's not something that's easy to understand. I got started with this concept probably 50 years ago with an engineer in Louisville who was an Altec engineer, and I don't know if that name rings a bell. That name's kind of gone these days, but they were the premium people at the time. And he was the first one to introduce me to this concept, the concept of how you want to study a space and how sound travels in a space. But it's counterintuitive to what's on the street again, because if you're in a bar band, you don't have a permanent setup. You've got temporary setup. So you can't put the loudspeaker in the best place. Now, that's not true of these big concerts. You go to a big concert outdoors and they've got line arrays that are suspended in the air on lifts. Those are engineered, guaranteed. There's not some weekend sound warrior thinking about, well, I really like this model of speaker. Let's shove it in the space. There's a lot of study and research done on how that's going to cover what the coverage is going to be for those speakers. But if you take a person in a church, a typical church situation, um, these guys are not informed. All you need to do is get onto some of these Facebook groups and follow what's being said there. They're just not informed. I'm not being critical of them. It's just the way it is. So the pastor's stuck with what he's got to work with. Case like that.
Yeah. And I read somewhere where you're not real big on brands. I mean, you're not, Steve and I kind of laugh a little bit because, we do streaming video and there's a lot of tech equipment out there. And sometimes one of the bigger churches will get a specific brand and Steve likes to call them the cool kids have got this. So my church should get it as well.
Yeah.
But you're not real, that's not something you subscribe to, right?
No, you want to, branding only counts when you start the process of thinking about it. Obviously, Yorkville, which is a little company up in Canada that makes band equipment, I'm never going to pull one of those things out and put it in a space. They just don't make the right kind of equipment. That's not what they do. But I might, well, I always pull out Rinkus Hines. They're a premium manufacturer. Again, it's not because of the brand. It's because I understand what they make. And I got introduced to them, kind of a sidebar, when I first got in this thing. Years ago, I went to a trade show, and they had all of their models of speakers hung on lighting truss, and they had their smallest speakers in the center, and then they got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until they got out to the big stacks that were on the end that you would put in a big outdoor concert. And those loudspeakers sounded exactly the same from little to big, except for the amount of bass. The bass always picked up as you got a bigger woofer. But their integrity, every place else in the spectrum, was the same at every loudspeaker. So I said, hey, if they have that much engineering and they understand how to build speakers to have that same level of quality across their lineup, they know what they're doing. But again, they're not the only one. I've had a relationship with them since, but there's people like Meyer and JBL and other names that you know. But no, you don't start with a manufacturer's name. You want to match the box to the metrics that we came up with when we studied the room.
Yeah. Wow. Fascinating stuff. How'd you get into this stuff?
I have no idea. To be honest with you, I was probably 13 years old. My church camp was putting in a 70-volt system, and I helped put it in, and they wanted somebody to volunteer to run the sound. That meant, we had 2 microphones, and that was it. But and then I'm a musician, or was. I don't anymore, but did some television and radio and that sort of thing. So it's all was kind of built in, and then I went to a large church, and they needed help with their recording and whatever, and so we developed a little recording studio, and just it was a sidebar interest for me that turned into a profession.
Yeah, wow, that's pretty. Wow, you know your stuff. All right, so we're out of town. We're out of time. Jim, the website is soundconceptsllc.com. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, so soundconceptsllc.com. And that's how people can get a hold of you, right? They can just go there and reach out to you.
There's an information form that can be filled out on there, yeah.
Okay, and you're in Ohio, as we mentioned earlier, but you can work with people, at least to some degree, anywhere, right? Anywhere in the world.
Yeah, that's true.
And people have questions or whatever, that you'll certainly help them with any questions they might have with the show. All right, good deal. All right, Jim, hang around for a moment and don't go away. I think we're out of time here, so sure appreciate everybody spending some time with us today. And if you haven't subscribed to the Church Solutions podcast, please do so. Give us a rating and let us know, and give us some feedback on this. And again, you can always get a hold of Jim Murphy by going to soundconceptsllc.com. And you can always get a hold of us lots of different ways. One of them is streamingchurch.tv. We do streaming video. We didn't really get into audio for streaming video, but maybe we'll do that next time. Steve Lacey is here. Thanks again, Jim Murphy. I'm Phil Thompson, and thank you for spending a little bit of time with us today on the Church Solutions podcast. Please take care of yourself and each other. Have yourself a great day.